All right, we are with Chris Cain from Bates Reels here on the Bite Me podcast, and wanted to get you on, Chris. Now, you guys were at the fishing show. I was there 2 or 3 days, I believe. Never got a chance to really do those interviews that we like to do with our partners and friends. So I wanted to get it done here because Bates has been, obviously, I say taking over the world. I think there'll probably be some people who will argue that, but certainly have a great footprint. And what interests me about Bates the most, and why I, have two or three, I think three, in my house right now, is obviously the reel itself, but I like the story, man. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I've tried to dig in, because I would like to learn a little bit more about our people. I think our listeners like to learn about how all these things started. As I understand it, and jump in as soon as I finish here, because set me straight. As I understand it, this has been a long time coming, going back to the Seaborn days, et cetera. And it was kind of, it was a great story of how the family even got here. Why don't you fill in the blanks there?
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having Bates on the show and just giving us a chance to tell a little bit of our story. So, yeah, man, I was at like 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. Buddy, our owner, he had sold a previous business that he had built up, and he had worked in the audiovisual industry for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And a large part of his job, or his profession at that time, was kind of like product design. So he was designing and kind of pseudo engineering all these really high quality AV components.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sold that company, spent a lot of time fishing in the days following that, and it just, I mean, he's a product guy, right? So in his
Mm-hmm.
mind, he's using this gear, and he's thinking like, man, I really think I can improve upon a lot of what I'm using. And so, man, he just started working on designs. And you're right. We actually, so we didn't necessarily come from Seaborn. We actually had two separate companies in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Bates, and then we had Seaborn.
Mm-hmm.
Seaborn was, it was an kind of an inshore and fly fishing brand.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bates, from the inception, was always designated to be kind of a conventional fishing world type brand. But we started a lot of our work with the Seaborn stuff, and in the fly fishing world, CNC manufacturing is kind of the standard, right? So all the highest end fly reels going back, gosh, I don't know, I mean, longer than 20 years now. All of that happens with CNC machining, and then in the conventional world, especially in like the low profile bait casting category, that type of technology and machining had not been used previously to manufacture those types of products.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were really blessed in that we had a couple of guys that helped us figure out the engineering and all the tool paths, and we took what was just like stasis or a normalcy in the fly fishing world, and brought that over and started making the first CNC machined bait casting frames out of solid block aluminum. So that's kind of the genesis of how all the bait stuff started, and all of that design work started back in like 2017. And then really we've just been on the market selling product for about the last 4 years.
Isn't that something,
man? It's been a wild ride, and I don't know that we're taking over the world in yet, like you said, but we at least like to think that we've stirred up quite a bit of energy along the Texas coast for sure.
Well, and none of this happens without a passion for fishing. And that's kind of one thing I want you to dig in on too. I don't know if a lot of people understand, Buddy and yourself and everybody involved. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Where's that come from?
Yeah, man. So Buddy, our stories are very different. Buddy grew up in Houston, and then down in the Dripping Springs area and around Austin. His grandfather or his great grandparents were immigrants to Port Houston, I guess, way back in the day. And so a lot of his upbringing was fishing like the Galveston coast with his grandparents, and that was where his passion for fishing really kind of started. I grew up over in bass fishing country in North Alabama. My dad was a big angler. I grew up doing that. When I was a teenager, I got really into fly fishing. And have really just never put down either one of those. Like if you go back way back deep into my story, baseball was my first love, and fishing was kind of back there behind it. And
Mm-hmm.
at one point, people told me I couldn't play baseball anymore, but nobody's told me I had to stop fishing. So,
Me too. Me too.
yeah, man. Yeah.
Funny how that works out. You can always do the fishing. I'm glad you mentioned that about Galveston area, because I had heard this story and I didn't want to say some, out of turn. But apparently, like, that was one of the things. I don't know if it was his father or maybe him with his grandfather and great grandfather. Used to just go fish the banks, old school style, and learn and get it done that way. So it's a terrific story of how it all started. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Buddy's grandfather, his name was Seaborn Hughes. So that's where that Seaborn brand came from.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of his passion for the inshore kind of brackish saltwater scene.
But he got the nickname Buddy, and now Buddy has the grandson has it, correct?
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. See, I thought I had it right, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you got it down.
All right, so let's talk about the reel itself, because as I mentioned, as you mentioned as well, it's really just been a last 4, 5, 6 year phenomenon. And I'm just going to put you on the spot. Why is that? I mean, there are a million. Might be exaggerating a little bit, but there's a lot of reels out there, a lot of quality reels out here. I'm not going to say anything bad about some of the great reels that are out there, but why is it? What resonates with baits?
Man, I think to some degree we're still trying to define that, right? Like a lot of our momentum is something we hoped before, but honestly has been a little bit to our surprise. Like it really has just exploded, especially with saltwater anglers. And so here's kind of our best guess. And it's part of our origin story too. Like one of the trends that we saw in conventional fishing gear, especially reels, which is where we kind of specialize, is that over the years, it seemed like there was more and more thought and technology and dollars being invested into all the internal parts of a reel. And their wrapping, like their frame, all of that stuff seemed to be getting cheaper and cheaper. So you have like a lot of really quality stuff inside, but there's just more plastic and like lesser alloys. It just seemed like a lot less thought and effort was being put into what we've really specialized in, which is our frames and what we feel like differentiates our product from everybody else. So this is like it's like the secret in fishing, and nobody talks about it from like a performance and engineering perspective. But all of those internal parts and pieces, the things that like all of our hopes and dreams as anglers are kind of hung on, like we need those things functioning correctly.
Yeah.
If all of those things are wrapped in plastic, and that plastic is subject to flexing and bending under pressure and under torque and stress, then all of those things that we need to function efficiently stop doing so over time, because they are also under pressure and stress, right? So if my frame's flexing, then those gears are also flexing and rubbing against each other. If my frame can be compressed, then those bearings begin rubbing against sidewalls and all that kind of stuff. So you're decreasing the longevity and the performance of your reel over time. Right. And we're just trying to course correct that. Yeah. We're trying to say like, hey, all that stuff inside matters, but the stuff outside matters too. And so that's where our CNC machining and our frames come into play.
Ease of use is something that, and weight. Ease of use and weight is something that everybody's looking for, the next latest, greatest. How are you guys approaching that? Because obviously it's something that you can just do in one hand and pretty much get it done. But how are you approaching ease of use and weight?
Yeah, well, the machining process really allows us to really fine tune, like wall thickness on our frames, and you can get aluminum pretty thin and it still be really rigid and effective. So that's where like a lot of our attention and weight reduction comes into play. We can actually, with aluminum, make a frame that ends up being lighter than some plastics and stronger. And then you can still keep all of the real high quality internal components and parts and pieces, and you end up with a product that, well, like I think our Hundo reel it's like 1/10 or 2/10 of an ounce heavier than the Lose Custom Light or something like that, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of the lightest, reels that's on the market. So we're right there in the ballpark with some of the lightest reels that's available, and yet our product is still built better. Um, and then as far as ease of use goes, I think, like, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that what our frames afford us is the ability to really take things like bearings and gears, which we often manufacture ourselves. As
Mm-hmm.
another component that's a little bit different about our company. We're not picking a gear out of a random box in a factory somewhere. We we manufacture and optimize our gears for our reels, so that's also a custom cut CNC milled product that's inside of our reels. But our frames allow us to really, and our tolerances allow us to optimize the efficiency of all of those internal parts and components, and we think that that means ease of use over a long period of time as well. We've
Yeah.
also done things like our braking system, which is not like, it's not like inherently new. We didn't shatter the fishing industry with some kind of new tech, but our matrix brakes, the combination of our magnets and our centrifugal brake,
Mm-hmm.
it really does play into that ease of use like you're talking about.
Well, it's fascinating, and obviously, I'm a fan. A lot of our listeners are a fan. Before we let you go, everybody's always looking. What's next? You don't have to give any industry secrets, but what's on the horizon that we can expect?
Sure, man. So I think long term, our hope and our desire, we want people to be able to associate the baits name with any kind of fishing that they're doing. So any water and any fish species that a reel's being used on or used for, we want to play in that space eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So down the road, you can expect offshore stuff and center pin stuff and like all the things, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
immediate future, what you can look out for are some products that are going to be not just designed, but actually manufactured in the United States.
Yeah.
We've got a full spinning reel series coming out. We're about to take some things that we learned from Seaborn and
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we've learned from baits, and we're going to make some things that play in the fly fishing space really well. So, man, I think there's a lot to look forward to. We acknowledge the fact that we're a premium brand and we want to stay that way. We want to make the best products for all of the anglers everywhere. And yet there is an angler that may not be able to approach the kind of
Mm-hmm.
products that Bates is making. So we've got a reel in the works that we think is going to land right around that $200 mark, maybe a little, a fraction below that. So we want to make high quality products approachable for everybody. So we're going to get into that as well. There's just a lot of things happening, man. A lot of
Man.
cool things in the background of Bates, and I think a really bright future. One of
Yeah.
the best parts about Bates is we're not owned by private equity. So all the things that we want to do, we have the
You can
freedom to
spend
do.
what you want. You can
That's
spend what
right.
you can
That's right.
spend what you want. Hey
Yeah.
man, we'll be here. We're looking forward to all that. Of course, so many listeners of the Bite Me podcast, have turned that way. And one of the biggest reasons I wanted to get you on is for that. And again, y'all were selling reels and running around with your heads cut off, so I didn't get to get you at the fishing show, but I definitely wanted to get you here. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having us, dude. I really appreciate it.
All right.